After the Israelites fled Egypt and camped in the desert, Moses' father-in-law Yitro met him there, bringing with him Moses' family to reunite them. The next day, Yitro observed many people lined up in front of Moses' tent from morning to night, bringing their disputes, disagreements, and all types of conflicts for Moses to decide who or what was right or wrong, settle differences, and make final judgments on all matters. When Yitro asked Moses what he was doing, Moses told him the people were coming to him to learn God's laws, which they had decided to embrace after seeing how this unseen God kept his word and got them out of Egypt. Yitro was appalled and said to Moses, Lo tav hadavar asher ata oseh. The thing you were doing is not right. He told Moses it was too much for him to be doing this all by himself. He could not keep up such a pace and have so many dependent upon only him. It was not good for Moses, and it was not good for the individual Israelites as well. Yitro told Moses he should appoint capable individuals who fear God, trustworthy ones who spurn ill-gotten gain, to serve as chiefs or judges over thousands, hundreds, fifties, and tens, and that only the most complicated or difficult disputes should be brought to Moses. As an attorney, this verse struck me profoundly. I never realized that the very judicial system that is in place today, not just in the United States, but all over the world, was devised thousands of years ago by a man who was in fact a pagan, a high priest of idolatry. And even more, this simple man specifically included and emphasized that the importance and actually mandatory requirement that the appointed judges be of the highest ethical character. The system suggested by Yitro so closely follows our practices today, containing lower courts for simpler issues, middle and specific level courts, such as criminal and family courts, etc., and then higher courts for appeals, and finally to the ultimate Supreme Court, which at that time, of course, was Moses himself. It is also particularly interesting that this is the very same Parsha where a little later, God gives the Israelites the Ten Commandments. Thus, Yitro's advice, which essentially created the entire structure of the legal and court systems, occurred before any actual laws even existed. Noting this, commentators have said that God was waiting until he knew the Israelites were open to receiving and following his divine laws. Perhaps it was only when God saw the Israelites accept the judicial system devised by Yitro and implemented by Moses that God was then satisfied that the Israelites could comprehend, appreciate, and accept the divine laws, and thus were ready to receive the Ten Commandments. I find this a bit analogous with the beginnings of our own nation. The new Americans needed to come together against a common, devastating enemy, the British, to reject the cruel, totalitarian rule being forced upon them and demand their freedom and autonomy. Although the early Americans were separate colonies, they banded together into one united front to fight and defeat the British, based on their common goal of achieving their freedom and creating their own independent nation. After winning their independence, they embarked on creating a new nation, inclusive of all the existing colonies and territories. And similarly, our nation's legal structure and governance, as devised and established by our Constitution, is meant to operate under the guidance of capable, ethical, and impartial judges and officials. But the big question remains for me, where have we gone wrong? Because the system is not working the way I believe Yitro intended it to. I see a tremendous decay of integrity within our governmental and public structures, running the gamut from city and local councils and administrative bodies, to law enforcement and school boards, to federal government representatives, justices, basically any and all of the many other structures required to live in a civilized society. That, in my opinion, is where we have gone astray. I believe Yitro's advice and counsel to Moses is strong and still stands. However, the original structure seems to erode when the humans, appointed as judges and representatives and officials, begin to fall short of the highest ethical and moral standards as emphasized by Yitro. It seems that the essential elements of honesty, uncompromisable character, and intention have been lost by our leaders. As we see and hear every day in the news, this has now spread to our congressional representatives and even our Supreme Court justices. The purposes of their positions is to serve others, not themselves. They need to be replaced with people who understand and believe in justice and fairness and love for all, the very advice Yitro gave Moses in order to have a just and fair community. The brokenness of our world breaks my heart. If all Judeo-Christian traditions include the Old Testament as part of their foundational learnings, then certainly everyone would be aware of Yitro's words regarding these values. How is it then that so many people who profess to live by and honor these principles blur the lines between simple right and simple wrong? We all clearly know better. Now it is up to us to do better. Shabbat Shalom.